The galaxy's most powerful races, from the crystalline Xorei to the fiercely intelligent Aether, gathered in the towering council hall on the neutral planet of Iridium, a place where decisions shaped the future of countless worlds. This was a solemn occasion, a meeting to discuss the alarming intelligence that had surfaced, an impending invasion, the likes of which had never been seen. But there was a problem. The one species that was meant to play a pivotal role in the fight against this threat, the humans, had been dismissed from the conversation entirely. For centuries, humanity had been nothing but a footnote in the galaxy's history, a species that had risen to prominence in their own sector of space, but had long been regarded as nothing more than a legend by the greater galactic powers. The tales told of a race so fierce, so resilient, that they could face an overwhelming force and still stand victorious, not through superior technology, but through an unyielding will to survive. The stories were dismissed as fables, passed down from generations of humans in the face of near extinction, myths crafted to explain how they had managed to survive against impossible odds in the distant past. Sitting at the head of the council table, surrounded by the most elite military minds the galaxy had to offer, the Aether ambassador, Lord Isaac, chuckled. His laugh, deep and resonant, echoed through the hall. "And what of this human myth we've heard so much about?" he asked, his voice dripping with mockery. "Tell me, what exactly should we fear from a species who were almost eradicated by their own warlike nature? A species who couldn't even protect their homeworld from their own environmental collapse?" The other delegates snickered, their faces twisted with disdain. The idea of humanity being a force to be reckoned with was absurd. Earth, their homeworld, had long been considered a lost cause, nothing more than a relic of a bygone era. After all, humanity hadn't even made it past their solar system's boundaries before falling victim to their own internal strife. The galaxy was moving on, leaving behind the remnants of a species that was a shadow of its former self. But there was one exception, Ambassador Kalira of the Aether. She sat in silence, eyes fixed on the data projected before her. The holomap displayed a vast, expanding fleet of unknown origin, moving toward the edges of the galaxy with unnerving speed. The reports were vague, but one thing was certain. This was no ordinary invasion. "I understand your skepticism," Kalira finally spoke, her voice measured calm. "But there are fragments of the myth that are not so easily dismissed. According to our ancestors, it was humanity who survived the first great galactic war. It was humanity who, against all odds, fought back against an empire far more advanced than any of us could imagine." The room fell silent, the mocking smiles slowly fading. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of what to make of the Aether ambassador's words. The myth had become a joke, and yet, deep down, something gnawed at Kalira. Something told her that the myth, buried in the depths of the galaxy's forgotten histories, was not just a tale, but a warning. What if? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sudden sharp noise, an unmistakable distortion across the comms. The air grew tense as a message began to flood the council screens. Unidentified fleet approaching. Coordinates. Berth. The room froze. The myth was no longer a joke. The myth had just arrived. The council hall plunged into chaos. Screens flickered, and hushed voices buzzed as the data streamed in, flashes of red across the galaxy's expanse, showing the precise trajectory of an unknown fleet. Kalira's eyes widened, her earlier unease morphing into a cold certainty. This wasn't a drill. This wasn't a random anomaly. Something had been triggered, and the universe was about to bear witness to the first real challenge to its order in centuries. "Impossible," Lord Isaac spat, leaning forward. His violet eyes flashed with disbelief. "There's no way. That signals a mistake. Earth was lost in its own chaos long ago. There is nothing there but ruin." But the message came through again, clearer this time. Unidentified fleet approaching Earth. Speed unprecedented. Estimated arrival, less than 25 hours. The image of a massive fleet appeared on the screens. A dark, jagged mass of ships like nothing the galaxy had ever seen. Unlike any known race's design, these ships exuded an almost unnatural energy, each one trailing a distortion of space, as if they were warping the fabric of reality itself. Prepare for immediate response. A grizzled Saray general barked, rising from his seat. Send our fleets. We will squash this threat before it even reaches Earth. But Kalyra remained seated, her gaze locked on the map. The room's tension was palpable, but it was not the growing fear in the air that gripped her. It was a sudden, sharp memory, an ancient warning, whispered to her by the elders of the Aether. A myth long dismissed, but one that, in this moment, she could not ignore. The humans were not to be underestimated. At that very moment, as though on cue, the screens across the room flickered and shifted again. A new signal blinked to life. The message was short, terse, a single line of text that made the hairs on the back of everyone's neck stand up. We are coming. Hold your ground. This is our home. The message was from Earth. Hold your ground? Isaac scoffed, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. What do they mean by that? Do they truly think they can stand against us? Against any of us? There was an unsettling silence. The other delegates stared at the screen. But Kalyra's mind raced. The response, too calm, too confident, almost familiar. Humanity had always been capable of surprising resilience. Had they always known something? Kalyra, despite herself, felt a growing sense of dread. She turned to the council's captain, a hardened soldier from the Viridian fleet, who had been watching the data with increasing alarm. What do we know about their defenses? The captain's face hardened. Nothing. Their forces are scattered. Earth has no unified defense fleet. There's a single human vessel en route to intercept. But, single vessel? Isaac interrupted, his voice rising with skepticism. They think they can face us with a single ship. A single ship with what? But the captain continued, the urgency in his voice increasing. It's not just any ship. The ship is human-made, but it is not like anything we've seen before. Its weapons are primitive, but its tactics, they're a mixture of ancient human designs and something else. We've tried to hack into their communications, but they're scrambling every signal. This is unlike anything we'd faced. Before anyone could respond, the comms crackled again, the voice now more urgent and desperate. Earth's last stand begins. Prepare yourselves. Then the signal was lost. A ripple of uneasy murmurs ran through the council. The room grew cold. For the first time since the invasion's arrival, a single question echoed in the minds of every delegate. Could this be the humans? The myth they had laughed at. The invaders had underestimated them for too long, and now, their own arrogance might be their undoing. But as the fleet continued its descent toward Earth, the council was left with one final terrifying question. How could humanity possibly have known the enemy was coming? Suspense. The clock was ticking. The myth was no longer a tale. It was a warning. And Earth was about to prove that it had always been more than just a forgotten world on the edge of the galaxy. The galaxy's nerves were on edge, the threat of annihilation looming closer with each passing moment. As the enemy fleet neared, each world began scrambling to prepare, but none were more perplexed than the Aether, who had dismissed humanity's ancient tales as nothing more than exaggerated fiction. Yet, in the cold silence of the command center, Ambassador Kalyra couldn't shake the unsettling feeling growing in her chest. Something was terribly wrong, and she felt as though the universe was about to turn on its axis. The alien fleet was now just hours away from Earth. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy's mightiest forces seemed vulnerable, unable to decipher what exactly they were up against. In their desperation, Kalyra's mind drifted back to the myth, the one that had been ridiculed so freely. Could it be that the Aether had gotten it all wrong? Was it possible that humanity, a species on the brink of extinction, had actually been preparing for something far greater than anyone had realized? She stood up abruptly, motioning to a holo console in the corner of the room. The projection was of Earth, its shattered defenses and the lone human ship hurtling toward the enemy. But what caught Kalyra's attention was not the human forces. It was an encrypted message buried deep within Earth's historical archives, hidden from the rest of the galaxy for centuries. The message had recently surfaced, carried by the same vessel that had sent the warning to the council. It was a transmission so old, it felt as if it had been waiting for the right moment to emerge. Her heart raced as she initiated the sequence to decode it. The room fell silent as the words began to materialize on the screen. The Earth was never abandoned. The myth of the humans is real, and we have been waiting for this moment to rise again. Kalira's eyes widened in disbelief. The words were not just a message. They were a prophecy, a cry for survival from a long-lost chapter of human history. Humanity wasn't simply fighting for survival against an alien enemy. They had known this war was coming all along, and they had prepared in ways the galaxy had never anticipated. The next line revealed an even darker truth. The invaders are not just strangers. They are us, our fractured past. A dark version of humanity that we left behind long ago. The shock hit her like a punch to the gut. The invaders were not another alien species. They were humanity's own creation, an offshoot of the human race that had been twisted by time and their own thirst for power. The humans had failed to defeat them once, but had forgotten the war until now. It was as if Earth had locked away the knowledge of this forgotten war, hiding it from the rest of the galaxy for millennia. Kalira immediately understood the gravity of the situation. The humans weren't just fighting for their own survival. They were fighting for the galaxy itself, for the very memory of what humanity could be. They had a history of resilience, and now they were determined to finish what was started long ago. But why? Why had they hidden this from the galaxy? And how had they known the invasion would come? Her thoughts were interrupted by a blaring alarm. The enemy fleet had arrived, their massive warships warping through space like dark harbingers of death, their weapons systems charged and ready. But there was something different this time, something that sent a shiver down Kalira's spine. The human vessel, the one that had initially been written off as a mere distraction, was moving towards the enemy with terrifying precision. It wasn't just a single ship anymore. It was a symbol, a rallying cry that the galaxy wasn't prepared to hear. Suspense. The enemy's fleet began to power up its weapons, and the countdown to the ultimate conflict began. As Kalira watched the human ship take its position, she realized the truth. The myth was no longer a tale. The humans were not just a forgotten species. They were the galaxy's last hope. And somehow, they had known all along that the war would come to this. Twist. The question now was no longer how the humans had known. It was whether the galaxy was ready to face the consequences of underestimating them. The galaxy's collective breath was held as the enemy fleet loomed over Earth, a dark shadow of impending destruction. The Aethar, the Xarai, and the Viridian fleet all moved into position, ready to defend the planet. But Kalira's mind was elsewhere. She could feel the tension building, not just in the air, but in her very bones. The myth of humanity had shifted, but there was still so much they didn't understand. What were these invaders? Why had they waited so long? And why had humanity kept this secret? She had always believed the myth was a simple tale of survival, but now it felt like a warning, a prophecy that had been hidden in plain sight. And now, as the enemy fleet neared Earth, Kalira had a sinking feeling that things were about to get much worse. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden appearance of a familiar face, Lord Isaac, the Aethar ambassador. His usual arrogance had been replaced with a rare look of concern. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low. "Not now, Isaac," Kalira snapped, her focus still fixed on the data streams, the growing fleet outside the window. "The battle is about to begin. There's no time for politics." "I'm not here for politics," Isaac replied, stepping closer to the hollow table. "I've been reviewing the data. The humans, they've been preparing for this, not just with their fleets, but with something else, something we didn't account for." Kalira's gaze flicked to him, suspicious. "What are you talking about?" Isaac's eyes darkened, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've been hiding something from us, something even the Aethar didn't know. Their fleets may not be their greatest weapon. It's their history, the technology they've been guarding for centuries, waiting for this moment to reveal it." Kalira felt a chill run down her spine. "What are you saying? What technology?" Isaac hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as if to make sure they weren't being overheard. The humans, they've been sitting on something far more dangerous than any weapon we've ever seen. An ancient machine, a war machine, older than any of us could comprehend, and it's buried deep within Earth's core. Kalira's heart skipped a beat. You're saying they've been hiding a weapon under our noses this entire time? I'm saying they've been waiting for the right moment to unleash it. They knew this war was coming long before any of us. The room seemed to spin. Could it be true? Had humanity been hiding this weapon for centuries, waiting for this moment? The implications were staggering. But there was something else gnawing at her, a sense of unease that she couldn't shake. Isaac, Kalira said, her voice tight with suspicion. If the humans were planning all of this, why did they involve us? Why didn't they just fight on their own? Isaac's expression hardened. That's what I don't understand either. But something has changed. The humans, they're not fighting for themselves anymore. They're fighting for something much bigger. And if we don't stop them, we could lose everything. Before Kalira could respond, the room shook violently. The alarms blared once more, louder this time, as a fleet of Althar warships materialized in the distance, their massive weapons primed and ready. But something was wrong. The readings weren't what they should be. They've turned on us, Isaac whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. The Aethar, they're defecting. Kalira's blood ran cold. She had trusted Isaac, trusted the Aethar's ancient wisdom and honor, but now she realized the bitter truth. The betrayal had already begun. As the galaxy's oldest race pivoted to strike, an urgent transmission flashed across Kalira's screen. It was from the humans, Commander Holt, leader of the human fleet. The message was brief but clear. We will fight to the last breath, and we will never be your servants again. The betrayal was complete. Suspense. Kalira's mind raced, torn between her loyalty to the Aethar and the realization that humanity's myth was not just a story. It was a reality they had kept hidden from the galaxy for centuries. Now, with the Aethar turning against her, the stakes had changed. The galaxy would never be the same again. Twist. The war had just begun, but the real battle was not between the invaders and the defenders. It was between the ancient powers of the galaxy and the myth that humanity had carried in secret for so long. And Kalira wasn't sure which side she was on anymore. The battle had begun in earnest. The Aethar fleet, once allies of Kalira, had now turned their weapons on the Viridian ships, and the air was thick with the hum of energy shields and the roar of missile blasts. But Kalira wasn't focused on the war around her. Her mind was elsewhere. The realization that humanity had been preparing for this moment, that they had a weapon hidden beneath the Earth's surface, consumed her every thought. She had no doubt now that the humans had known the enemy would come. They had been waiting for this, waiting for the betrayal, waiting for the galaxy to finally see them as they truly were. She turned toward the holo console, trying to piece together what she had just learned. Isaac had said the humans had something hidden under Earth's core, an ancient machine, one so powerful that it could tip the balance of the war. But where was it? How had they kept it a secret for so long? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp alarm, blaring in the corner of the room. The transmission she had been waiting for had arrived. The holo projector activated, displaying a rugged, battle-worn human officer. Commander Holt. His face was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes burned with something else, something that sent a chill down her spine. Defiance. Ambassador Kalira, Holt said, his voice gruff but unwavering. I don't have much time, but I need to make something clear. The enemy you're fighting, the one that's about to wipe out your fleets, they're not aliens. They're humans, our own people, the ones who failed us, the ones who became something else. Kalira's pulse quickened. The pieces were falling into place, but she still couldn't quite grasp the full picture. What do you mean failed? She asked, her voice low, though the words felt like a weight in her chest. You're telling me your own people turned on you? Holt's eyes flashed with bitterness. They turned long ago. They've been hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy, waiting for the moment to strike. They're not just coming for Earth. They're coming for all of you. For everything the galaxy has built. and they'll stop at nothing until they have it all. He paused, his gaze intense. The machine under the Earth's surface? It's called the Aeon Engine. It's not just a weapon, it's a doorway, a gateway to a power beyond anything you can understand. And we've been preparing to use it to defend our world. But we're not the only ones who know about it. Kalira's mind reeled. A doorway? What kind of power could humanity have hidden for so long? And why had they kept it so secret? And why was Holt telling her this now? Was it a trap? Or had they really been waiting for the galaxy to wake up to the truth? What do you want from us? Kalira demanded, her voice sharp. Why send this message? Why now? Holt's face hardened. Because you need to understand this, Ambassador. The humans may have been quiet, but we never stopped fighting. We never stopped preparing. And we've come to realize something. If you want to survive this war, if you want to stop them, you need to stop thinking of Earth as a broken relic of the past. The truth is, we are not alone anymore. The humans have evolved, become something else, and the galaxy needs to face what's coming. Kalira's breath caught in her throat. The room felt colder than it ever had. What do you mean, something else? Holt hesitated for a long moment, and then he dropped the bombshell. The Aeon Engine is a weapon of unimaginable power, but it has another function. It's a bridge to a new way of thinking, a way of being. And when we activate it, the entire galaxy will be changed. The humans who remain will lead the way, and the rest of you will either adapt or you'll be left behind. Before Kalira could respond, the transmission cut out, leaving her in stunned silence. Her mind whirled as she tried to comprehend what Holt had just revealed. The Aeon Engine wasn't just a weapon, it was the key to something more, a transformation. But what did this mean for the rest of the galaxy? Suspense. As the enemy ships continued their advance, and the conflict on the battlefield raged on, one thing was certain. Humanity's myth had never been more real. The war was no longer just about survival. It was about a shift in the very fabric of the galaxy itself. And Kalira had no idea whether she was ready for what was coming next. Twist. Holt's message had been a warning, but also a call to arms. The humans weren't just fighting for survival, they were fighting for the future of the galaxy. And the rest of the universe would either have to join them or face annihilation. The minutes stretched into eternity as Kalira sat in the cold silence of the command room, her mind still reeling from Commander Holt's cryptic message. The Aeon Engine, a doorway to something more, a bridge to a new existence. The words echoed in her mind, clawing at her thoughts. What kind of power could humanity possess that was capable of changing the very fabric of the galaxy? She glanced up at the holo console again. The enemy fleet was closing in. The Aethar, Viridian, and Zoray forces had already engaged in fierce combat, but the energy in the air had shifted. There was a palpable sense of uncertainty. The humans weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting to transform the very order of the galaxy. The myth had come to life, and Kalira could no longer deny it. The question now was, who would survive the new era, and at what cost? Her thoughts were interrupted by an urgent transmission. The voice on the other end was heavy with urgency, and there was no mistaking the fear in it. Ambassador Kalira, you need to see this, the voice said, trembling. The Aeon Engine, it's activating. And it's doing something unimaginable. Kalira's stomach dropped. Where? Tell me everything, she demanded, her voice sharp. The transmission flickered, and the image of a vast cavern deep beneath Earth appeared on the screen. In the heart of the planet, a colossal machine, the Aeon Engine, stood dormant for millennia, slowly coming to life. But this wasn't just any machine. It was pulsating with energy, sending waves of distortion rippling through space itself. The image zoomed out, showing the shockwaves reaching beyond the Earth's atmosphere, disrupting gravitational fields and warping space-time. The galaxy's forces, unaware of the true nature of the machine, were now struggling to maintain their position. Ships faltered, their energy shields flickering, unable to withstand the distortions radiating from Earth. The voice on the transmission continued, barely holding together. Kalira, it's opening a doorway, a gateway to another realm, a new dimension perhaps. The energy readings are beyond anything we've ever encountered. But one thing is certain. The moment it fully activates, everything will change. This isn't just about humanity anymore. Kalyra's eyes widened as the realization hit her. This wasn't just an ancient weapon. It was a key to something far greater, a bridge to a power so immense it could unravel the very fabric of the universe. Before she could respond, a sudden surge of energy tore through the command center, knocking her off her feet. The room went dark, and alarms screamed in the background. The energy from Earth's core was interfering with every system, every piece of technology. The gateway was opening, and no one knew what would come through on the other side. But there was something else, a shift in the battle above. The Aethar fleet, once so confident in their superiority, began retreating, their ships flickering in and out of existence as if their very existence was being pulled toward the anomaly. One by one, their vessels vanished, leaving only the remnants of the conflict behind. Then, the transmission came through again, this time from a different source, a voice she had not expected. It was Commander Holt once more, but this time, his tone was different. "You're witnessing it, Ambassador," he said, his voice hoarse. "The transformation is beginning. We're not just fighting for Earth anymore. We're fighting for the entire galaxy's future. What happens next depends on what you choose. You'll either stand with us and embrace the change, or you'll be left behind." Kalyra's heart pounded as she realized the true stakes of the war. The battle wasn't just for survival, it was for the very essence of what the galaxy would become. The humans weren't simply trying to win a fight, they were trying to reshape existence itself. Suspense. As the gateway continued to open, Kalyra found herself torn between two worlds, the established order of the galaxy she had always known, and the terrifying unknown that humanity had unleashed. The choice wasn't just about picking sides anymore. It was about facing the inevitable consequences of the Aeon Engine's activation. Twist. But as the gateway fully opened, Kalyra saw something that made her blood run cold. Through the rip in reality, she caught a glimpse of what lay beyond. A massive, monstrous force, an army of twisted beings that had been trapped in the darkness for millennia, now freed by the humans' actions. And they were not coming to save humanity. They were coming to claim it. The moment the gateway tore open, the entire galaxy seemed to hold its breath. What had been an enigmatic distortion in the fabric of space-time was now a full-fledged rift, a massive tear in reality itself, spilling out an unnatural pulsating energy that reverberated through every ship, every planet, every sentient being. Kalyra stood frozen, her eyes wide in horror, unable to tear herself away from the screen. Beyond the rift was something that defied description. It wasn't just another dimension, it was a void, an abyss that seemed to stretch on forever. And within it, Kalyra saw the first of them, shadows. Not just shadows in the physical sense, but shapes of darkness that shifted and writhed, barely comprehensible, like ancient creatures clawing their way into existence. The air in the command center crackled with tension. There was no mistaking it now. This wasn't the gateway to a new era of humanity. This was the opening of a prison that had held something far darker than any of the galaxy's enemies, and humanity had unleashed it. Kalyra stumbled back from the holo table as the reality of the situation settled in. This wasn't a new order or a revolution. Humanity had opened a door to something they could never control, and the creatures coming through it were not allies. They were not even enemies. They were predators. She quickly keyed in a transmission to Commander Holt, but the message went unanswered. The energy from the rift was interfering with all communications, scrambling signals across the battlefield. Panic began to set in as the true magnitude of the situation unfolded before her eyes. Ships that had been aligned with the humans were now turning, veering off course in confusion and fear. The rift was pulling at them, distorting their very perception of reality. The first of the creatures slipped through, its form barely visible, an indistinct mass of shifting shadow and nightmare. It seemed to flicker in and out of existence, its presence distorting the space around it. And then another came, and another. "They're here," Kalyra whispered to herself, her voice barely audible over the hum of the command center's alarms. "The ones the humans were hiding from us." She had no time to process it further. The creatures were no longer confined to the rift. They were spilling into the galaxy one by one, twisting the fabric of reality as they went. They didn't need ships or weapons. Their mere presence disrupted everything they touched. A single shadow slid across the surface of a Viridian warship, and in moments, the ship was gone, disintegrated into nothingness. Kalira's mind raced. Was this what humanity had been preparing for all these years? Had they always known that the creatures they had sealed away would one day return? And why had they unleashed them? To control them, or to be the first to harness the unimaginable power they held? She gripped the edge of the console, her knuckles white, trying to steady herself. Her worst fears were coming true. The humans hadn't just opened a door. They had broken the seal on a nightmare. The creatures emerging from the rift were not of this universe. They were from a place beyond comprehension, a place that thrived on chaos and destruction, and humanity had welcomed them back. As Kalira watched, the human forces, once the most resilient, now scattered and fragmented, seemed to rally, their ships regaining control, but it was too late. Their efforts were futile against an enemy they had only just realized existed. The first wave of creatures began moving toward the nearest inhabited planet. It was clear what they wanted. The power they sought was not of this world, but of every world, and they would stop at nothing until they had it all. Kalira's thoughts swirled in confusion and fear, but there was one thing she knew for certain. The battle was no longer about humanity's survival. It was about the galaxies, and if they couldn't stop the creatures pouring through the rift, there would be no victory, no peace, no future. Suspense. As the creatures grew in number and power, the galaxy's forces scrambled to respond, but they were already outmatched. The galaxy wasn't just facing a war, it was facing an extinction-level event, and the only question left was whether humanity had made a pact with these horrors to ensure their survival, or whether they had doomed them all. Twist. The final, chilling truth became clear. Humanity hadn't just unlocked a force of destruction. They had become the unwitting gatekeepers. The rift had been opened because it was always meant to be opened. The humans were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to keep the universe from falling under the shadow of an ancient evil. The rift was fully open now. The creatures that had slipped through in their thousands were no longer mere shadows. They had begun to manifest as beings of pure malice, flesh and energy wrapped into shapes too horrifying for even the strongest minds to comprehend. They moved with terrifying purpose, their presence warping reality itself. The galaxy's military forces, fractured and panicked, were scrambling for answers, but none came. On Earth, the Aeon engine pulsed like a heart that had awakened after eons of slumber. The very core of the planet was vibrating with energy, raw, untamed, and deadly. Humanity had done it. They had unleashed the ultimate weapon. But the horror they had opened was beyond anything they could control. Now, the universe was paying the price for their arrogance. Kalira stood before the hollow console, watching in horror as fleet after fleet was swallowed by the dark tide. The Viridian ships were already on the verge of retreating, their commanders broadcasting frantic messages, warning of the nightmare spilling through the rift. Azar, the proud leader of the Aether, had vanished into the blackness, his fleet's signal fading into nothingness. The galaxy was falling apart in real time. But just as the sense of hopelessness threatened to swallow her, a new transmission arrived. This time, it wasn't from Commander Holt. It was from someone else, someone unexpected, a human leader, standing in a war-torn command center, his face bloody but determined. Kalira, the man said, his voice steady but urgent. We don't have much time, but there's something you need to know. You are right. The humans didn't just open the door to these things. They've been fighting them for centuries. Kalira felt a cold shiver run down her spine. Fighting them? She asked, her voice low. You're telling me these creatures have been here before? The man nodded grimly. Humanity knew about them long before the galaxy did. Our ancestors fought these beings when they first arrived, millennia ago. The Aeon engine was created to seal them away, to keep them locked in the dark. We've been keeping the knowledge of these creatures, their existence, hidden from the galaxy for centuries. Not because we wanted power, but because we knew the moment the rift opened, everything would change. Kalira's heart raced, and he didn't warn anyone. Why? We couldn't. We couldn't risk it. You have no idea what kind of destruction these things can cause. If the galaxy had known the truth, it would have been chaos. It's only now, as the rift opens fully, that the real fight begins. Kalira's mind was reeling. So what now? What can we do? The man's gaze hardened, determination flashing in his eyes. We need to close the rift. The Aeon engine can still be used, but only if we channel the power back into it. It's the only way to stop the creatures from fully crossing over and tearing the universe apart. Then why hasn't anyone tried? She demanded, frustration clawing at her. Why hasn't Earth done it? Because the price is too high. The engine's power is immense. But to use it properly, someone has to be connected to it. Permanently. The person who controls it will be bound to the energy, their body consumed by it, their essence lost forever. The engine doesn't just activate, it requires a sacrifice. Kalira's breath caught in her throat. And who's going to make that sacrifice? There was a long pause, and then the human leader's voice came again, strained, but resolute. We've been waiting for someone like you, Ambassador. You're the one who has the will to stop this. But to save the galaxy, you'll need to make a choice. Her pulse raced. Was it possible? Could she really wield the power of the Aeon engine, knowing it would cost her everything? And then in the distance, she saw it. The first of the creatures advancing toward Earth. The darkness was spreading. She had no more time to think. Kalira, the voice urged once more, are you willing to make the choice? Her eyes locked on the destruction unfolding around her, the screams of her allies and enemies alike echoing through the comms. There was only one path left. Suspense. The weight of the decision crashed over her, each heartbeat thunderous in her ears. The very fate of the galaxy rested in her hands. Could she live with the cost of the power needed to stop this nightmare? Twist. With the roar of a battle lost, Kalira understood. This wasn't about saving humanity. It was about saving everything. The moment the rift opened, humanity had not only opened a door to destruction, they had given Kalira the chance to become the hero the galaxy so desperately needed. But to wield the Aeon engine, she would have to embrace the myth that humanity had been hiding all along, to become the very force that sealed the universe's fate, or to lose herself in the process. And just before she made her final choice, the rift pulsed again, its energy flooding through her veins. She could already feel it.